Okay, so we're doing the notes for 2.4, vertical angles and linear pairs. These were the words that we explored yesterday on the board on that activity, but now we just need to write it all down in our notes. So our basic definition, our vertical angles are two angles that are across from each other when two lines intersect. Okay, so it's two angles that are the ones that are across from each other when two lines intersect. And we talked about this yesterday, and you guys said it was, in front of each other, or like a mirror, or looking at each other, and those are all very good descriptions of it. So it's the two angles, again, that are across from each other when the lines intersect. So in this picture, which ones would be the vertical angles? Well, it would be, if I start with number 2, what's the angle that's across from it? So directly across from it would be angle 4. So we would say angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles. And then what would be the other pair that are also vertical angles? Well, it would just be angle 1 and angle 3. So we would also say angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles. Okay, so once again, that are directly across from each other, straight across from each other, not the ones that are next to each other. Our vertical angles theorem, I think this is the first word we've seen this word, theorem. A theorem just means a rule. It's kind of like that word postulate that we learned. So a theorem is like another rule. And all that this rule says, and you guys figured this out yesterday, is that vertical angles are always congruent. Always, always, always. Okay, remember congruent just meant that they are the same or equal. Okay, so no matter what, if we know one of our vertical angles, the other one is always going to be the same. So look at example 1. If this angle here is 50 degrees, then its vertical angle, the one that's directly across from it, would equal 50 degrees. Nice and easy. Okay, so just that vertical angle. Oh, and remember how we talked about remembering this? Right, that if you look at those two lines crossing, remember, right, that this top one, write this down so it helps you remember, is like a V for vertical, and that this bottom one is like an A for angles. So we have vertical angles. So use that to help you remember. It's the ones across from each other like this. All right, so how about this one? Example 2, find the value of x. We've got 76, 104, and then here's x. Well, if we know vertical angles are always across from each other, directly across, so if this is 76, then x would have to be 76 degrees. Okay, turn the page. This is the other word we learned yesterday, a linear pair. We were calling it LP, right? So a linear pair is just, again, two angles that form a line. We talked about that. And are adjacent, right, next to each other. And last part, supplementary. You guys came up with all these definitions yesterday when we did the activity on the board. So two angles that form a line and are adjacent and supplementary. So if we forgot what adjacent means, you can write it right next to it. It means that it's right next to it, that shares a side, and supplementary means that it adds to 180. The way we can remember this is see the word line means that it forms a line. All right, so it's a pair of angles that forms a line. So in our picture, notice here that angles 5 and 6 definitely form a linear pair because they form, the two of them together form this straight line at the bottom. They're adjacent because they're next to each other and they're sharing the side in the middle. And they're supplementary, that's our next line here. They are also supplementary angles Why are they supplementary? Because if I add these two together, I'm going to get 180 degrees. So the measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 6 would equal 180 degrees. All right, let's try a couple examples. Find the value of x in the drawing below. So we know that one of them is 115. They form a line or a linear pair, LP for linear pair. So if they form a linear pair, the two of them together are supplementary. They equal 180 degrees. So how would I find the missing one? Well, 115 plus what equals 180? So we can set it up two different ways. We can just set it up like this with an equation. 115 plus x equals 180. And then we know how to solve this. We would subtract 115. And we get 65 degrees. And that's our answer. There's another way, and the other way that some of you would just do this would be sort of the shorthand way. You'd say, well, the whole thing is 180. I want to find the missing one, so I would just do 180 minus 115, and you'd get your answer like that. And that's fine. You can just do it the short way, or you can actually set up the equation. When we have more complicated problems, it's going to be helpful to set up the equation. Example 4. Find the value of the 3 missing angles in the drawing below. Well, let's label them so we know which angles we're talking about. I'm going to just call this angle 1, angle 2, and angle 3. Okay? So the easiest one to find is always going to be your vertical angle. Right? So remember, vertical angles are going to be across from each other. So 150 and 2 are the vertical angles. And we know that vertical angles are always congruent. So if this is 150, how many degrees would angle 2 have to be? 150 as well. So that part's kind of easy. But now let's try and figure out 1 and 3. Well, if you look here, there's actually a linear pair. If I draw that line, these two angles next to each other are supplementary, adjacent. They form a line. If I just ignore everything on this side, those two are a linear pair. And we know that linear pairs have to equal 180 degrees. So how would I find the missing one? Well, I would just do 180 minus the 150 that I already know. And what would be that missing angle? 30 degrees. So we've got 150, 30, and 150. Now how would I find this last missing one? Well, what's the relationship between 1 and 3? They're across from each other, so they're also vertical angles. And vertical angles are congruent. So if angle 1 is 30, then angle 3 will also be 30 degrees. And we have found all 3 of our missing angles. And you should be able to do this now with any 2 intersecting lines. If I give you one angle, you should be able to find all 3 other ones just like that. Okay? That's it for your notes.